Welcome everybody to another episode of the Pulse of Israel here in our eternal and ancestral homeland, the land of Israel, in our beautiful, eternal, indigenous, and indivisible capital, Jerusalem, since King David's time. I'm about to share with you a theory, a very plausible theory, that can help us better understand how Israel and the IDF were surprised by the horrific Arab-Muslim attack on Israel on October 7th. It is very disturbing on multiple levels, but stick with me. It connects what the U.S. administration did to Israel back in the 1973 Yom Kippur War and with what is happening to us today, before, during, and after the October 7th massacre. I'm about to share with you quotes from United States and Israeli officials back from the Yom Kippur War in 1973, which show beyond a shadow of a doubt that the U.S. administration back then and United States intelligence services knew about the planned attack by the Arab world against Israel in 1973 that they were going to do on Yom Kippur. And the U.S. administration then forbid Israel from defending itself in order to, as I quote, make Israel bleed. That's a direct quote from then U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, in order to then squeeze Israel diplomatically. So, what are we seeing today, post the October 7th massacre? Well, we know that Israel had the intelligence information about Hamas's intent and plan to infiltrate Israel, kidnap Israelis, murder Israelis. And if Israel had that intelligence information, then it is pretty plausible to accept that the United States intelligence services also had that knowledge, because U.S. intelligence services are far beyond the capabilities, most probably, of Israel, if not equal. And now, after the worst massacre of Jews ever since the Holocaust, the Biden administration is pressuring Israel, squeezing Israel, to accept the creation of a terror state called Palestine, which makes absolutely no sense, as it ignores the evil intent of both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority to kill Jews and destroy the Jewish state of Israel. Creating a state called Palestine now, more than ever, it rewards them, rewards the evil enemies of the Jewish people for massacring over 1,000 innocent Jews on October 7th. It empowers them to continue massacring us, because not only are they not getting punished, but they're getting rewarded, and it ignores the fact that a vast majority of the Israeli public are totally against the establishment of a terror state called Palestine, as even many center-left Israeli Jews today have finally woken up to realize that the Arab Muslims in our midst are not interested in living in peace with us in their own state, but they are interested in massacring us and destroying the Jewish state of Israel. Hence, there is an eerie similarity between the U.S. administration's actions regarding the Yom Kippur War back in 1973 and the actions of the Biden administration today with regards to the October 7th massacre and the diplomatic squeeze of Israel and the aftermath. Now, do I have proof that the Biden administration and U.S. intelligence agencies knew beforehand about the October 7th massacre and allowed it to happen in order to make Israel bleed? Again, using former Secretary of State Kissinger's language back from then in 1973 and applying it today to then squeeze Israel diplomatically like they did to us back then in 1973? No, I don't have that definitive proof. I don't have the proof that they told Israel or their connections in the Israeli army or intelligence agencies to stand down. No, I don't have that proof, as I said before. However, I'm about to share with you the information from the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and then have you think for yourselves. Because if the U.S. administration did this, made Israel bleed to then squeeze Israel back in 1973, is it not plausible that they might use that same exact playbook again today? So this is serious food for thought. And again, I'm just putting the theory out there, and here is the information, the proof from 1973 to then figure out, are we going through the same thing today? Now, I highly advise you to watch the interview I did with Bruce Bill, a retired U.S. soldier who served in the NSA during the Yom Kippur War. He shared with us his first-hand knowledge and how he and U.S. intelligence services back then in the 1973 Yom Kippur War knew that the Egyptians and Syrians were going to attack Israel, yet the U.S. did not tell Israel. You do not want to miss that interview. Again, it's right here. Now I will tell you more information about the 1973 Yom Kippur War that will shock you to understand what I was saying just before regarding my theory. Here I found an article titled, 50 Years After the Yom Kippur War Revisionist Historians Strike. And the subtitle, Somehow, all the articles managed to miss one of the most crucial aspects of the conflict, how Henry Kissinger prevented Israel from launching a preemptive strike. Now, follow me as I share with you word-for-word quotes from that article documenting the U.S. and Israeli diplomats who were then active in that war effort. And I quote, on Yom Kippur morning, hours before the 1973 Arab invasion, Prime Minister Golda Meir was informed by her military intelligence officials that Egypt and Syria were massing their troops along Israel's borders and would attack Israel later that day. The Israelis immediately contacted Kissinger. Mati Golan, longtime chief diplomatic correspondent for Israeli newspaper Haaretz, described in his book, The Secret Conversations of Henry Kissinger, what happened next. And I'm quoting now from the book. Till the very outbreak of the fighting, Kissinger remained more concerned with the possibility of an Israeli preemptive strike than an Egyptian-Syrian attack. Kissinger instructed the U.S. ambassador in Israel to personally deliver to Mrs. Meir, the prime minister, a presidential entreaty, that is a warning in the name of President Nixon, not to start a war. That's on page 41 of his book. Abba Eban, who was then Israel's foreign minister, confirmed in his autobiography that Israeli Army Chief of Staff David Elazar proposed a preemptive strike. But Prime Minister Golda Meir and Defense Minister Moshe Dayan rejected the proposal for a preemptive strike on the grounds that the United States would regard this as provocative. Page 509. Further confirmation comes from the widely acclaimed book, The Prime Ministers, by the late Yehuda Avner, a distinguished Israeli diplomat who witnessed Kissinger's actions up close. Avner was a speechwriter, secretary, or advisor to 5 different Israeli prime ministers from both sides of the political spectrum, bluntly wrote that American officials, meaning Kissinger, tied Golda's hands on the eve of the Yom Kippur War, telling her in no uncertain terms not to fire the first shot. They even warned her against full-scale mobilization of Israel's reserve soldiers. According to David Makovsky, formerly an Obama administration Middle East envoy, Kissinger's plan was to orchestrate a limited Egyptian victory. Walter Isaacson, in his definitive biography, Kissinger, confirmed Kissinger opposed giving Israel major support that could make its victory too one-sided. Kissinger told Defense Secretary James Schlesinger that the best result would be if Israel came out a little ahead, but got bloodied in the process. Page 514. A little bloodied? Do you know how many Israeli soldiers were killed in that war? 2,656 Israeli soldiers were killed in the Yom Kippur War because of that surprise attack. Now going back to Avner's The Prime Minister's book, Avner quoted from a conversation between Kissinger and then President Richard Nixon on the 9th day of the war. Israel was begging for U.S. weapons. Kissinger, with Nixon's agreement, was still stalling on the weapons shipments. We've got to squeeze the Israelis when this is over and the Russians will know it, Nixon said. We've got to squeeze them goddamn hard. Kissinger replied, again, these are all quotes, well, we are going to squeeze them. We are going to start diplomacy in November after the Israeli elections. And squeeze them they did, pressuring the Israelis to release the encircled Egyptian Third Army and various other concessions. That is the end of the quotes from the article and the books. Now, I ask you, if the U.S. administration and U.S. intelligence agencies set up Israel to bleed, according to then U.S. Secretary of State Kissinger back in 1973, stopping us from defending ourselves to preempt the war, allowing over 2,500 Israeli soldiers to be killed in that war, all in order to then squeeze us diplomatically. How far-fetched is it that today they did the same thing to us? Having Israel stand down, allowing for the October 7th massacre to happen, without over 1,000 innocent Israelis to be massacred, for our captives to be taken, in order for us to bleed terribly once again, to then squeeze us diplomatically to create a Palestinian terror state. How far-fetched is that? Again, that's just a theory. Now for the good news. If that theory is true, thankfully the Biden administration ignored a major piece of information. They did not expect the unbelievable reaction of unity and purpose of the Jewish people in Israel to the October 7th massacre. They probably expected a weak Israeli public after a year of anti-government protests that really split the country, and they thought they can easily squeeze the Israeli government and the Israeli people with their dangerous diplomacy to create a terror state called Palestine. Instead, what we have today is a strongly unified Israeli Jewish population, tremendously against the evil diplomatic plan of the U.S. administration to recognize the creation of a terror state called Palestine. So that even the center-leftist politicians in Israel, who usually follow U.S. dictates, are publicly denouncing the U.S. plan to recognize Palestine. The U.S. administration totally misread the Israeli street, and they're misreading the Israeli street, and their evil plan to recognize Palestine will fail. The Jewish people in Israel will not allow any politician to allow for such a plan, because we now all know, most of us, that peace with these subhuman Arab Muslim in our midst is impossible. So whether or not the theory is true, don't worry. We will overcome the evil Biden plan to recognize a Palestinian state. Not only that, as I keep telling you, the only just and moral solution is our liberating Gaza and resettling Jewish communities in Gaza. That is the only solution to ensure the security of all Israelis from Gaza. As for the Arabs, one way or another, they will leave Gaza. What will it take for them to leave, and when that will happen? I don't know. But it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Guys, everyone remember, Am Yisrael Chai. Hold on to the truth. Hold on to strengthening your faith in the one above, and share the truth. And again, what I shared with you today is a theory, but a plausible theory based on history of U.S.-Israel relations. And we are seeing, regardless if the theory is true or not, that the U.S. administration is being totally disconnected from reality, forcing Israel to accept the creation of a terror state called Palestine, which rewards our evil enemies. But don't worry, as I said before, they're going to fail. Gaza is Jewish from the Bible. We had Jews living in Gaza for hundreds of years, even thousands of years ago. The famous song Yeribon that Jews sing all over the world on Friday night Shabbat was written by a rabbi who lived in Gaza back in the 14 or 1500s. Jews lived there in the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century. We're going home. It belongs to us, and God is telling us the only way we could be safe is by us living there, which it belongs to us as well. So, signing off for another episode of the Pulse of Israel here in our eternal and ancestral homeland, the land of Israel, in our beautiful, ancestral, biblical, indigenous, and indivisible capital of Jerusalem since King David's time. If you are not yet a subscriber to the Pulse of Israel, go to pulseofisrael.com and click to subscribe. For our short videos, follow us on Instagram, either Avi Abelo or Pulse of Israel. And if you enjoy our content and you think it is important for more people to see the inspiring, politically incorrect truth from the land of Israel, just click on the donate button every once in a while on pulseofisrael.com to support our work so we can get these videos seen by many more people. Shalom, everybody, and thanks for watching.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.